Eagles, Packers tonight. Virtually an elimination game for the Packers. I mean, if they don't win, they'd be 4-7, 5 straight losses. We'll get the vibe from Green Bay. Rob Demovsky, ESPN.com, NFL Nation. Green Bay in town trying to snap a 4-game skid where their defense has been horrendous. They'll go against a Eagles team that can't catch the ball. So this should be an entertaining one, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're looking at the worst secondary that we've seen over the last couple of weeks against a team that can't catch, can't get open. So who wins that battle? The bad secondary, the bad receivers?
That's a great question. I mean, you would think that both of these groups have a chance to get out of their funk. The one thing the Packers have going for them, guys, is that they're getting cornerback Demarius Randall back on the field. He hasn't played since he had surgery on a sports hernia on October 20th. So he'll be back for the first time. He went into the season as their number 2 corner behind Sam Shields. Sam Shields hasn't played since week 1, and he won't play the rest of the year. So they were without their top 2 corners for most of the year. At least now they get one of those 2 guys back.
Yeah, and this defense has really struggled in recent weeks, and it's not just in the secondary too. They're not getting as much pressure on the quarterback, and of course, the Eagles' offense, though, they're missing Matthews. He's not going to play tonight. Sproles had the rib problem. It looks like this game could fall in the hands of a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who lost in all this, is playing pretty darn well.
Yeah, it's funny. Early in the year, the story around this team was what's wrong with Aaron Rodgers. Well, in the last month or so, Rodgers has actually played pretty well. He's played at his best when they've gotten into a quick rhythm passing game, a lot of short stuff, gotten the ball out of his hands quickly. Where they've struggled is when, he, quite frankly, can't find anybody open and has to dance around. And, yeah, he's made some plays out of the pocket, but that's not, in the long run, that's not the way they want to play. They want to get into a quick rhythm. They want to throw the slants, the crosses, and then hopefully get some sort of running game, which they haven't had, to open up some play-action stuff. And that's really where the big difference with this offense has been. Without the threat of a run, they've had no play-action, which means no deep balls down the field.
Rob Demovsky with us, covers the Packers for ESPN. And, Rob, one of the stats I saw earlier in this matchup, or talking about this matchup, was the last time James Starks started a game against the Eagles, he went off for 123 yards. That was the 2010 playoffs.
The wild card, yeah.
Yeah, Green Bay, not much of a rushing attack ever since Eddie Lacy went down. But how do you describe the Green Bay running attack, or lack thereof, this season for the Packers?
Well, I'd be absolutely stunned if James Starks went for 120 yards again. He's averaging like 2.5 yards a carry this year. The one unknown, I guess you'd call it, is that they're going to have Kristen Michael in the backfield this week for the first time since they claimed him off waivers about 10, 12 days ago. He didn't play last week, by the time he got to Green Bay on Thursday, just didn't have enough practice time to get himself acclimated. So they've got a new threat at running back. You're right, their offense hasn't been the same since Eddie Lacy went down a month or so ago. At least they now have a couple of options as true running backs in case one doesn't go well. But, again, we're talking about a team that doesn't have a rushing touchdown by a running back this year. In fact, the only 3 rushing touchdowns they have all year all belong to quarterback Aaron Rodgers.
Now, of course, out here, our narrative has been how the receivers can't get open, but Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb.
They can't get open at all, Pete.
Aaron Rodgers has targets.
Well, yeah, they have good numbers, but I still say those numbers are deceiving because they're throwing it on like 70-some% of their offensive plays. I mean, if you're a fantasy football guy, you probably are pretty happy with those guys you mentioned. But if we're talking about real football, they throw the ball so much that their stats are kind of inflated. But they need someone to make a play down the field. And you look at Aaron Rodgers' yards per attempt, he's somewhere in the mid to high 6s. That's just not very good. I mean, when he was at his best, he was in the 9 yards per attempt type of area. Now he's in the 6s. It's indicative of their inability to strike deep.
Rob Demovsky covers the Packers, ESPN.com's NFL Nation. Has the McCarthy stuff come up at all? I mean, is it his name mentioned on the hot seat out there at all? We know the fact that Green Bay has had a lot of success sometimes, can kind of sweep that under the rug. If this was Philadelphia, he'd probably been fired by now just because they lost 4 in a row by the fans, not the actual team. But you catch my drift.
Yeah, people are definitely want to blame somebody for it. There's no question. I find it a little hard to believe that they would make a coaching change, given that, I mean, this is a team that's been in the playoffs 7 straight years. Only the Packers and Patriots can say that. It's a remarkable run of consistency. Do you really fire a guy after one bad season? Now, on the flip side, there's I guess it's sort of the Andy Reid argument. And is it just, after 10, 11, 12 years, does a coach's message get stale, and is a change necessary, not because he's not a good football coach, but because you need to change the way you're doing things because a new voice is needed or a new leadership is needed. I mean, if that's the case, then I could see something happening, but based on his track record, his past success, I don't think that's reason to let the guy go.
Yeah, and obviously this is a big game for them tonight. A loss tonight, does that change anything in terms of that narrative?
I don't think so. I think they already know what they're going to do, whether they're bringing them back or not. I mean, whether you end up, 6-10 or 8-8 or whatever the case, 9-7 at best or whatever the case may be, I'm guessing they've made up their mind. The powers that be probably know what they're going to do.
Rob, I'm a guy who loves special teams, and the Eagles' return game versus the Packers' kick coverage could be an important matchup tonight. Are you looking at that as well?
Yeah, Ron Zook, the Packers special teams coordinator, before he even took a question in his media availability this week, brought up the Eagles' return game and how much it had his attention. The Packers have had some trouble in the coverage units. The Packers' own return game has basically been non-existent. So that is definitely an area. There's a couple areas in this game where I think the Eagles have a chance to exploit the Packers. That's one of them. I think the tight end matchup, I think Ertz has a chance. They've struggled with covering tight ends all year. So I think those are two matchups that if I were the Eagles, I would try my best to exploit.
Well, Aaron Rodgers said the Packers can run the table. They'll have to start it tonight in Philadelphia, where the Eagles are undefeated at home. The Packers have lost 4 straight. What's the vibe entering this game? Is it, very businesslike, knowing that basically their season is on the line?
It's been a pretty upbeat locker room the last week or so, which is, and it's my guess is Aaron Rodgers coming out and saying, I think we can run the table was an effort to create a better vibe. But from an inside the locker room feel, I've covered some bad seasons. I covered a 4-12 season in 2005, and right now anyway, this doesn't quite have that type of vibe to it. So, I do think that it could splinter and come apart fairly quickly if they don't win tonight. But I do think they're going into this still feeling okay about where they are.
Yeah, a lot of people nationally, Rob, seem like they're saying they're done. This team's not very good. Forget it, just because it's the Packers. Is that correct? Do you sense that this Packers team just isn't very good this year?
Yeah, I think there's a lack of talent. I definitely think that injuries have hurt them at 2 positions, running back and cornerback, and they really had no in-house replacements for those spots because I think that they don't have a lot of young skill position talent. You look at their so-called playmakers, and Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, Clay Matthews, they're all in their 30s. Really the only young playmakers that they have right now is maybe Devontae Adams and I guess Randall Cobb, and Cobb has just had an okay year. So you go through their last 3 or 4 drafts, and it's not like there's a ton of playmakers that jump off the sheet.
Rob, I see from your Twitter feed that you're also appreciating the Eagles and Packers have such a history, and it looks like my man Mike Mahoney was able to hook you up for a little VIP tour of Franklin Field, the site of Vince Lombardi's only playoff loss, and you got to see the Palestra too, so you're working in a little sightseeing on your trip out here as well. But if you could just talk about that Eagles-Packers history.
Yeah, first of all, that was fantastic to see. I've covered the Packers since 1997, and the game that jumps out for me, I don't know what they call it around here, but in Green Bay they just call it 4th and 26.
Yes.
The playoff game where was it Freddie Mitchell?
Freddie Mitchell.
I'd like to thank my hands.
I'd like to thank my hands.
Exactly. The Packers thought they had that game won, and it was just an absolutely devastating playoff loss. To me, that's one of the maybe top 5 most memorable games that I've covered in my 19 or 20 years covering the team. So there was a stretch there in the early to mid 2000s where it seemed like the Packers and Eagles played just about every year, and most of them were here. So it was, I think it's a great rivalry, both then and now for teams that, aren't in the same division and don't regularly play each other.
Couldn't agree more. Going back, Eagles fans remember who Bryce Paup is. So, yes, there's a rivalry between these two teams.
That ruined that season, man. We'll see the Eagles and Packers tonight. You can listen to the coverage. Merrill Reese goes into the Eagles Ring of Honor tonight with Jeremiah Trotter, and then Merrill and Mike Quick have the call right here on 97.3. Rob Demovsky will be covering it for ESPN.com's NFL Nation. Rob, thank you so much, pal.
My pleasure, guys.